My name's David, and I'm going to tell you about something that happened to me about 4 years ago. I was living in a duplex on the east side of the city. Nothing fancy, just a place I could afford while I was between jobs. The landlord, Mr. Chen, he was decent enough. Kept the place maintained, responded to calls pretty quick. The first thing I noticed was the hallway light. It was in the common area between my unit and the neighbor's side. The bulb would burn out constantly, like every 2 weeks. Mr. Chen replaced it 4 times in the first month I lived there. He even put in a higher wattage bulb the last time. Said maybe that would help. It didn't. I started just keeping my door locked and not worrying about it. Then my neighbor moved out. I didn't know the guy well. He kept to himself. But one morning I saw his unit was empty. I asked Mr. Chen about it when I paid rent, and he said the guy just gave notice suddenly. Packed up and left within a week. Chen didn't seem concerned. Said it happens sometimes. The hallway light went out again about 3 days later. I called Chen to replace it again, but this time I mentioned it seemed to die really frequently. He got quiet on the phone. Then he said, just leave it. Don't worry about it. I asked why, and he said he'd take care of it. When he came by, I noticed he didn't actually replace the bulb. He just checked the fixture, nodded to himself, and left. I started noticing the light was always out after that. I got used to walking to my door in the dark. It was only about 15 feet, so it wasn't a big deal. Then one night I came home around 10 p.m. I was walking from my car, keys in hand, and I was just about to unlock my door when I heard something from the other unit's door. It was a sound like breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing. I stopped. The hallway was completely dark except for the faint light from the street coming through a window at the end. I couldn't see anything. I unlocked my door as quickly as I could and went inside. I told myself it was nothing. Probably the pipes, probably just me being jumpy. But I locked the deadbolt behind me. The next morning I went to check the neighbor's door. There was nothing. No sounds. It was just a door. But I noticed something small. The doormat in front of that unit had shifted. It was angled toward the hallway instead of facing the door, like someone had kicked it or dragged their foot across it recently. I kept thinking about that breathing sound. I'd lived alone my whole life, and I knew what my own breathing sounded like. This was different. This was slower. That weekend I saw Mr. Chen putting in a new washer and dryer in the basement. I went down to talk to him, and I casually asked about the neighbor again. I said something like, "Hey, just out of curiosity, how long was that guy living there before he left?" Chen was quiet for a while. Then he said, "A few months." "Why?" I didn't want to sound crazy, so I just said I was wondering if the unit was going to be rented out soon. He said probably not for a while, that he wanted to do some work on it first. I asked what kind of work. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "The last few people who lived there reported things. Sounds at night. Noises." Mr. Chen said it was just an old building settling. But that wasn't true, I could tell. His face was doing something it wasn't doing before. His jaw was tight. I didn't push it. I went back upstairs. That night I heard the breathing again. It was in the hallway, right outside my door. I was in bed, and I just froze. It lasted for maybe 30 seconds. Then it stopped. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day I called Mr. Chen and asked if I could break my lease early. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "When?" I gave 2 weeks' notice. I didn't tell him why. I packed methodically, trying not to think about the hallway. On my last night there, I heard it again. The breathing. This time it sounded closer to the wall between my unit and the neighbor's. I put my headphones on and left them on all night. 2 days later, I was out. I've rented in other places since, but I've never looked into what happened in that duplex or why Mr. Chen wouldn't tell me anything. Some things, I figured, are better left alone.
I woke up at 3:47 a.m. because I needed water. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a dry throat, the kind of thing that pulls you out of sleep when the house is too quiet. I didn't think anything of it. I live alone in a small apartment in Denver, and I've always been a light sleeper. so I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and headed toward the kitchen. The hallway was dark, but I didn't turn on the lights. I know my apartment well enough to navigate it blind. When I got to the kitchen, I could see the faint glow from the microwave clock, 3:47, like my phone said. I opened the cupboard where I keep my glasses, grabbed one, and turned to the sink. That's when I noticed the kitchen table. I have one chair at my kitchen table. I live alone, so I never needed more than that. But there was someone sitting in the other chair, in the dark, not moving. I couldn't make out her face at first, just the shape of her. She was wearing something dark, maybe a jacket. Dark hair, thin frame. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, hands on the table, facing toward me but not quite looking at me. Or at least, I couldn't tell if she was looking at me. My first instinct was to scream, but something stopped me. I think it was the absolute stillness of her. Screaming felt like it would break something. I stood there with my glass in my hand, and we were both just quiet. "Who are you?" I said. My voice sounded wrong in the dark, too small. She didn't answer. She didn't move. She just sat there. I turned on the light. The chair was empty. The table was empty. The whole kitchen was empty except for me, standing there in my pajamas with the drinking glass, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck. I checked my apartment, every room, every closet, under both beds. Nothing. All the doors were locked, including the sliding glass door that goes to the balcony. Windows locked. I even checked the bathroom and behind the shower curtain. I know how stupid that sounds, but my hands were shaking while I did it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with all the lights on until it got light outside. I told myself I'd had a half dream, one of those things where you're not quite awake and your mind fills in details that aren't there. Sleep paralysis, maybe, but without the paralysis part. It happens. I've read about it. But here's the thing that kept bothering me. I was holding a glass. I'd picked up the glass before I saw her. I filled that glass with water while I was looking at an empty kitchen, and I didn't remember doing it, and I didn't remember setting it down. But when I turned the light on, that glass was sitting on the counter, full of water. Ice-cold water. I tried to convince myself I'd filled it during the blackout moment when I switched on the light, that I'd blocked it out mentally somehow. But I knew I hadn't. The sequence had been open cupboard, grab glass, turn toward sink, see her, see empty chair. That was the order. I moved out 3 weeks later. I gave my landlord some vague reason about the commute not working out, and I found a new place on the other side of town. It took me 2 months before I could sleep with the lights off again. I still don't know what I saw that night. If I had to guess, and I've had a lot of time to guess, I'd say it was something that didn't know I was fully awake yet. Something that didn't expect me to turn the light on. And I'm glad I did, because I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't. If I'd just stood there in the dark, waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting to see her face clearly. I don't live alone anymore. I have a roommate now, someone I found through a mutual friend. It's not much, but I can't bring myself to go back to that. Knowing that someone, or something, had enough time to sit in my kitchen to watch me sleep, to wait for me to wake up. That awareness that someone had been in my space before I knew they were there is the hardest part to let go of.
His clothes never went in a machine. I didn't think much of it at first. People are weird. I'm weird. I like the routine of Wednesday nights. But then I started noticing he always positioned himself where he could see everyone's phone when they were texting or scrolling. He never looked obvious about it. It was more like his eyes would drift that direction, then back to whatever he was pretending to focus on. One night in March, a college girl came in around 9:15 with her laundry. She was maybe 20, wearing headphones, sitting 3 machines away from me. I remember she had a blue backpack with pins on it. She started her first load and sat down to do some work on her laptop. The guy in the Carhartt, I'd started thinking of him as just Carhart. He got up and walked to the vending machine, but he angled himself so he could see her laptop screen perfectly. He stood there for 4 full minutes looking at the snack options he wasn't going to buy. His gym bag stayed in the chair. Here's what bothered me. When she packed up to leave, she went to the restroom for a minute. While her stuff was running, her laptop was just sitting there. I watched Carhart look at her laptop, then at the bathroom door, then back at the laptop. He didn't touch it, but he was considering something. I could see it in how still he went. The girl came back, closed her laptop, and left. Carhart sat back down. I asked myself why he was really there. And once I started asking that question, I couldn't stop noticing things. Like how he seemed to follow a pattern. He'd wait until someone young came in alone, usually a woman. He'd study them for a while. Once, he actually followed a girl out to the parking lot. I watched through the window. He didn't approach her. He just went to his car, which was parked 2 spots from hers, and sat in the driver's seat watching her load her laundry basket into her trunk. I considered telling the laundromat manager, but what would I say? That a guy sat in a chair? That he looked at people? That he occasionally left at the same time as other customers? It sounds crazy when you say it out loud, but it kept eating at me. So one Wednesday in late April, I did something I'm not proud of. When Carhart went to the restroom, I took a photo of his face from across the room. It wasn't a great photo, blurry, taken from my phone, but I posted it on a local community forum asking if anyone recognized him. I didn't say anything specific. I just said I was concerned about someone's behavior at a specific laundromat, and was trying to get a sense of whether I was being paranoid. Within 3 hours, I got a private message from a woman. She said she recognized the guy. Said his name was Richard Voss. Said she was pretty sure he was the reason her sister had gone missing 2 years ago. She told me that her sister, Emily, had gone to a laundromat near the University District in 2022. She was doing laundry late at night, and the next morning, Emily's car was found in a parking garage 3 miles away. But Emily wasn't in it. There was blood on the driver's seat. A lot of blood. The police investigated, but Richard Voss was never charged with anything. There was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. He'd been questioned because he was on the laundromat security footage that night, but he had an alibi, or claimed he did. Something about being at a friend's house. The sister said she'd always been convinced he was responsible, but the police couldn't prove anything. She said Emily was never found. I stopped going to that laundromat after that. I started doing laundry at home, even though my apartment doesn't have a hookup and I had to buy a portable washer. It's inconvenient, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I kept going there, I'd be waiting for something bad to happen. That I'd be waiting for him to decide that I'd seen too much. I did contact the police and gave them the information. I told them about my observations, showed them the photo. The detective I spoke with said they'd look into it, but he didn't sound convinced there was anything current to investigate. A cold case wasn't a hot lead, he explained. 3 months later, I searched for recent news about Richard Voss. There were no recent articles. No arrests. As far as I could find, he was still out there. Maybe still going to laundromats on Wednesday nights, looking for someone alone. The worst part isn't not knowing if he hurt anyone else. The worst part is knowing that I could be sitting across from someone evil. Someone who's done real harm, and the only thing that makes them stand out is that they're patient. They're methodical. They don't rush. They just watch, and wait, and study the people around them until they find the right moment. And how would any of us even know we're being watched until it's too late? Smell him. This old, musty smell. Like someone who'd been sitting in the same clothes for days. And I could hear him breathing, this slight wheeze through his nose. When I finally got the nerve to actually turn my head and look at him directly, he was already looking at me. His eyes were completely white. Not the whites of his eyes. The entire eye socket was filled with white, like someone had painted over them. But he was definitely looking at me. I think I made some kind of noise. My hands tightened on the wheel, and he smiled. His teeth were the same color as his eyes, just white, solid white. He didn't say anything. He just kept smiling at me while we drove. We were passing through a stretch of road that was completely empty in both directions. No other cars, no houses, just highway and dark trees on both sides. My brain started racing through explanations. Exhaustion, a stroke, carbon monoxide from the car's heating. But the rational part of me that was still functioning knew that none of those things explained how another person was physically sitting in my passenger seat. I thought about pulling over. I thought about calling 911, but my hands wouldn't cooperate with what my brain wanted to do. We just kept driving at the same speed, and he kept looking at me with those white eyes and that white smile. After maybe 5 minutes, though it felt longer, he turned his head slowly back toward the windshield. He looked out at the road ahead, and I realized I could move again. I accelerated. My hands shook so bad I could barely keep the car steady. I was doing 80 on a highway where the speed limit was 55, and I didn't care. I glanced over at the passenger seat, expecting him to still be there, but it was empty. Just my empty seat. The buckle undone like it always was, nothing else. I made it home in about 30 minutes instead of 40. I sat in my driveway for probably an hour before I could bring myself to get out. I checked the passenger seat with the interior light on. There was nothing there. No depression in the seat like someone had been sitting. No smell anymore. The next morning, I looked up the stretch of highway I'd been on. There'd been a major accident there in 1987. A drunk driver had hit a sedan head-on. 3 people died, including an older man whose name and photo were in the local archive. When I saw the picture, I recognized him immediately. It was the man in my car. I drove that route again about 2 weeks later in daylight. I was hoping I'd feel something, some confirmation or explanation, but it was just a normal stretch of highway. No marker, no indication that anything had happened there at all. I haven't driven that road at night since, and I haven't seen him again. But sometimes when I'm driving late at night on empty highways, I feel that same sense of recognition, like something in the car is about to shift. That feeling is the worst part, knowing what it's like to have that happen, and being afraid it might happen again.
I heard the kitchen light turn on, but I didn't hear the hallway light click first. It's a small thing, the kind of thing you might dismiss immediately, but I was awake and alert, and something in my brain flagged it. So I got up and walked to my kitchen.
She was standing at my open refrigerator, looking inside. From behind, in the kitchen light, she looked exactly like my sister. Same height, same build, same hair. She was wearing the same sleep shirt she'd worn the night before. "Can't sleep?" I asked. She closed the fridge and turned around. And here's where it gets weird. Her face was my sister's face, completely. Same everything. But when she looked at me, there was a delay. Like, her eyes took a moment to move toward me after I'd spoken. Not a dramatic pause. I'm talking less than a second. But it was there. A processing delay. "Yeah," she said, "hungry." That was fine. That made sense. But I kept watching her, and she turned back to the fridge without saying anything else. She pulled out some leftover pasta I had, got a fork, and just stood there eating it straight from the container, looking at nothing. My sister never did that. She always sat down. She was particular about it. I must have been staring because she suddenly became aware of me watching her. When she turned her head this time, the movement seemed smoother than before, less natural, like she was adjusting her behavior based on feedback. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "I'm just tired." I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. People act weird when they're half asleep. Habits change. I didn't always turn on the hallway light first for everything. Why would she? The next morning, my sister came into the kitchen like normal, and everything was fine. Completely fine. She made coffee. We talked about her job search. She mentioned going to the grocery store. Everything seemed right. I felt stupid for being weird about it the night before. But here's the thing, and this is what I've never been able to explain. My sister left my apartment that afternoon to go back to her own place, and about an hour after she left, she called me. "Hey," she said, "did you need anything from the grocery store? I'm going to head out in a few minutes if you want me to grab stuff for dinner." I sat there in silence for maybe 5 seconds, and I felt all the blood drain from my face. "You're not at my apartment?" I asked. "No," she said, confused. "I left like an hour ago. Remember? I told you I was going home." I told her I was confused, that I'd mixed up my timeline and hung up. I walked through my apartment checking every room. Everything was locked. Nothing was disturbed. It was like someone had just left. I called my sister back and asked her very carefully what she had done the night before when she couldn't sleep. She said she'd slept fine, woke up when I did that morning. She said she didn't get up in the middle of the night. For the next 3 weeks, I tried to figure out a rational explanation. I watched security footage from my hallway camera. Nothing. No one came in or out after she left that day. My apartment has one entrance, and I would have heard it. The only explanation I could come up with was that I'd been having a lucid dream or a very vivid half-sleep experience. It happens to people. You're not fully awake, your brain fills in details, and it feels real. I've read about it, but I've also never experienced anything like that before or since. And more than that, when I really think about it, and I have hundreds of times, I remember details that are too specific for a dream. The temperature of the kitchen, the exact sound of my fridge compressor, the taste of my pasta from when I'd eaten some the night before, and could still taste the garlic. Dreams aren't usually that detailed. Last year, I asked my sister if she'd ever had anyone tell her she looked like someone else. She said no, not really. I asked her if she had any childhood memories of being sick or in an accident where she'd been unconscious. She gave me a weird look and said no. We haven't talked about that conversation since. I've never told anyone this story, not in full, because the only way it makes sense is if something got into my house and wore my sister's face well enough to fool me. And that doesn't make sense. That's not how the world works. But I've also never invited her to stay with me again. And every time she visits, I find myself watching her, waiting for that processing delay, waiting to see if she forgets to turn on the hallway light first. She hasn't stayed over since. I think maybe she noticed I was different with her, and she just decided to visit during the day instead. That's probably the real explanation. But I still wonder sometimes, and I still lock my bedroom door at night.